Designated a National Historic Site of Canada in 1987, Britannia Mines was an important source of copper ore for almost 70 years. During the 1920s and 30s, it was one of the largest mining operations in Canada. With its massive financial success, also came tragedy and loss of life. The discovery of Britannia is credited to Dr. A. Forbes, a medical doctor with an interest in prospecting. In 1888, Forbes's medical practice looked after the small communities around Howe Sound. He occupied a cottage approximately 30 kilometers from the mouth of Britannia Creek, near what is now called Hopkins Landing, just north of Gibsons. His attention was drawn to Britannia Mountain by a fisherman named Granger, who showed him a copper-stained rock and offered him to show its source for a $400 fee. Granger took Forbes to a site near the summit of Britannia Mountain, but the area was mostly covered with snow, and what was visible showed nothing of interest. The next day, while prospecting lower on the mountain, Forbes spotted a buck and shot it. In its death throes, the buck kicked moss off an outcrop and exposed mineralization. Forbes uncovered what he described as a good showing, and upon a promise of secrecy, paid Granger $400. Granger bought a boat and sailed for Alaska, never to be associated with Britannia again. Over the next several years after the discovery, Dr. Forbes left his claim open, as no one was looking for any other mineral except gold. In 1893, he sought government aid in developing either Britannia or either of the other two properties he had interest in. The Ministry of Mines supplied geological reports which found no commercial mineral interests at Britannia. And that was that. Dr. Forbes lost interest in the property, and for a few years, it seemed as if no development would be made. After several failed attempts to develop a mine, the Britannia Mining and Smelting Company took over in 1904. Building a community at the beach for surface operations called Britannia Beach, and up the mountain called Jane Camp for the underground mining operations. These two communities were approximately 4.5 kilometers apart. Crushed ore was transported from the mine by aerial tram at Jane Camp to Britannia Beach for processing at a gravity concentrator, resulting in concentrate of about 10% copper. It was then shipped off for smelting to Crofton, near Ladysmith. By 1912, all the high-grade ore had been mined and milled, and in order to mine low-grade ore, Britannia needed to expand, requiring a new wooden gravity concentrator that was capable of 10 times the capacity of the original. Mill No. 2, completed in 1916, working in conjunction with Mill No. 1, produced 2,000 tons of ore per day. Its design implemented a new flotation process that had been tested in the original concentrator in 1912. Britannia Company dispensed with its Crofton smelter and began shipping all of its ore to a smelter in Tacoma, Washington, an association that lasted until 1960. With the onset of the First World War, copper production was in high demand. The Imperial Munitions Board, an overseeing and purchasing body, received most of the copper from Britannia. To keep up to the demand, the mine kept expanding with more plants and more workers. At its peak, the mine employed 900 men. On March 21, 1915, disaster struck. An avalanche of mud, rock, and snow crashed through Jane Camp just as the men were coming off the midnight shift. Nearly 60 men, women, and children were killed, and another 22 people were injured. It was a terrible blow to the tiny community. Construction immediately began on the new and safer town at the 2,200-foot level that became known as the town site, or Mount Shear. By 1917, the mining operation consisted of 12 levels, each level consisting of large caverns connected by a tunnel system, as well as an open pit at the top of the mountain. There was more bad luck in store for the Britannia communities. During a brief period of shutdown in 1921, Mill No. 2 burned to the ground. Just 7 months later, on October 28, 1921, after a full day of torrential rain, a massive flood destroyed much of the community and mine operations that existed at the lower beach area. The flood was caused when a dam up the mountain, not able to hold back the runoff from the rainstorm, gave way. The ensuing rush of water decimated Britannia Beach. 50 of 110 homes were destroyed, and 37 men, women, and children lost their lives. From this devastation also came stories of rescue and survival. A floating house with a woman still inside was rescued when Yip Bing was able to jump onto it and bring her to safety. In another heroical moment, Bert Bacon dove into the raging river to rescue a baby on a piece of wreckage he saw floating by. Carlton Perkins Browning directed the reconstruction of this portion of the community and the new Mill No. 3, which stands today. Being an isolated, close-knit community which could only be accessed by boat, life in both of Britannia's towns was never dull. The Britannia Mining and Smelting Company tried to minimize turnover by providing amenities and implementing family-friendly policies. With a thriving social calendar, it saw sporting events, theatrical productions, dances, movies, and parties held throughout the year. The mine boomed in the late 20s and 30s, becoming the largest producer of copper in the British Commonwealth. It was supplying an impressive 17% of the world's copper. Seeing it from the ground, there is no way to get a feel for how massive the Britannia Mine was. It had 210 kilometers of tunnels stretched over 1,750 meters of vertical distance, from 1,100 meters high in the Britannia Mountains to a depth of 650 meters below sea level. Although copper prices increased during World War II, the workforce of the mine dropped to about 400 as men enlisted in the armed forces and felt the lure of better jobs in the wartime industries. The Britannia mines became unionized and suffered through a first strike in 1946. After some boom years in the early 1950s, copper prices sank to an all-time low. The outside world came to Britannia when the rail line from Squamish to North Vancouver was completed in 1956. 2 years later, the Squamish Highway was constructed. Community life could not compete with the outside attractions, and residents abandoned Mount Shear. To cut costs, all operations were moved to the beach, and the once proud Britannia Mining and Smelting Company Limited was reduced to just 7 employees. In 1959, the company went into bankruptcy and its assets were taken over by the Howe Sound Company. This was not the end for Britannia, however. In 1963, the Montana-based Anaconda Mining Company bought the property from Howe Sound. Although 300 employees managed to produce 60,000 tons of copper concentrate each year, new ore was running out. Operating costs and taxes rose, making it harder for the mine to keep open. On November 1st, 1974, 55 men went underground on the last shift, and Mill No. 3 shut down. During the 70-year history of the mine, 60,000 people have called Britannia their home. The Britannia Beach Historical Society was established in 1971 as part of BC's centennial plans. Its goal was to preserve the history of mining activities in British Columbia. The museum opened in 1975 as the BC Museum of Mining. With an underground tour, visitors can experience what it was like to be a miner half a century earlier, or try your hand at gold panning and take home whatever riches you find. With the completion of a massive exterior rehabilitation in 2010, the museum was renamed the Britannia Mine Museum.